This just in, Jethro, the priest of Midian in Exodus 18, is not a good guy. He's a bad guy. He is mentioned as the father-in-law in Exodus 18 9 times. Moses' father-in-law, he had heard when he was a priest of Midian, while he was in Midian, he had heard of what the Lord had done to Moses. He heard. And then how the Lord had brought them out of Egypt. Then Jethro took Zipporah, Moses' wife, but it says after he had sent her back. So from Midian, he's taking Zipporah and coming to see Moses, and he's bringing Zipporah's Zipporah's and Moses' sons, Gershom and Eleazar, with her, but also he's bringing his sons because we see Hobah later bugs out after a year. He sees he splits. They get ready to leave Mount Sinai after a year and go to Kadesh Barnea. And Hobah says, "I'm out of here." Moses says, "No, come on with us. Come on, we'll go in the wilderness. It'll be great. The blessings we get, you'll get. Oh, you'll be eyes to us. Oh yeah, come on with." And he's like, "No, I'm out of here." Okay, so this Midianite priest, he's a priest of Midian. He's not a priest of God. Okay, number one. He says he heard of this, and so he takes his daughter, through his daughter, it takes her back to Moses and says, "Well, I've heard of this stuff. How?" And he came with his sons into the wilderness, and where Moses was encamped by the Mount of God. And Jethro says, "I, your father-in-law, come with your wife and your 2 sons." And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and he did obeisance, obeisance, obeisance. He obeyed him. Mistake number one. He's obeying God. This is just after the bitter waters of Marah, the plentiful waters and oasis of Elam, the wilderness of Shur, 3 days travel through Dafka and something, and then the Jesus standing on. They complained about the rock and the manna. They had gotten the manna and quail for a day to eat as flesh pots, and manna came that same time. And then Jesus stood on the rock when they complained about being thirsty, and Moses struck it one time, and the rock split. Jesus on the rock gave them water enough to feed their entire nation plus their cattle. You know that water's coming out. Oh, all this happened, and then they're at that's at the Rephidim, where the Amalekites had just come against them, like over near Midian, and Jethro probably would have heard, but these Amalekites came to Rephidim, and Joshua beat them all out. But so Jethro, his father-in-law, has come back after all this, and he says, "I come here with your wife," and Moses did obeisance to him and kissed him and asked of each other's welfare. Oh, that's what they do in Jewish stuff. Okay, fine, but he still did give him obeisance. He obeyed him. Let's see how this works out for Moses. Remember, God Almighty, are you with us? Are you with us? Are you, miracle after miracle after miracle, the cloud by day, and now here they finally are at Mount. This is prior to the 10. This is after the Red Sea, prior to the 10, after everything I told you. Okay, so Moses told him about all that. Not only how they had come out of Moses tells him, not only how they had come out through Pharaoh and conquered Pharaoh, because that's all he mentions, Jethro mentions, but then Moses comes out and says, the additional stuff that I just told you, and Jethro rejoiced. Oh, good for you, Jethro. And Jethro says, "Now I know that your God is above all gods." This is your first Nicolaitan hierarchy reference. We see it last in Revelation. Jesus hates the Nicolaitan, the doctrines of the Nicolaitans. This is not Saint Nicholas, some guy Nicholas. Oh, what's this Nicolaitan hierarchy? Nico, to conquer. Laity, the people, the lay people, conquer the lay people. He hates that. They lord over, and Jesus, in one of the 4 Gospels prior to Revelation, speaks and says the Nicolaitans lord over one another. They have one guy over a guy on his left and on his right. And they have a guy on that guy's left and a right, and a guy on that guy's left and a right. And pretty soon you've got a pyramid scheme where it all goes to one guy, a king, a president, A pope? You don't do this to this one guy. Moses and Aaron, it doesn't even go to Moses. It goes to Moses and Aaron. God Almighty says you're going to go to Pharaoh, you're going to be his Elohim, and Aaron's going to be your prophet. Because Moses said, "Oh, not me, Lord. I talk funny. I don't do whatever. I have uncircumcised lips." And he says, "Behold, look who's coming, Aaron." So this Jethro coming saying and saying, "Oh, now I know that he is God of gods." It's implying like, oh, he's in charge of Zeus and Apollo and such. And so he not only rejoiced, okay, let's take it. Maybe he's just chill about this and he's like really for God. Jethro does burnt offerings. Burnt offerings are fine. Burnt offerings are your barbecues. You don't burn it. It's funny, a burnt offering you don't burn wholly. There are whole burnt offerings, which you literally burn whole, but even your Passover lamb is a whole burnt offering, but you eat it. A burnt offering is what Cain and Abel would have been doing. Noah, Abraham, Lot, anybody, they would have been doing burnt offerings. They built an altar here, they built an altar there. It's not a temple they built and started doing sacrifices for my sins back at Noah, back at Abraham, back at, Cain and Abel, but burnt offerings, even in Leviticus. Here, if your offerings be burnt, do this and this and this. If your offerings be out of the cattle, do it this and this and this. If your burnt offerings be out of the sheep, do it this and this and this. If your burnt offerings be fowl, do it this and this and this. And you're supposed to put oil on it and make it delicious, fried, and even it says at certain points, if it be an offering, a peace offering, the peace offerings would be the same thing, like only you're like more recognizable, like, hey, I'm doing a burnt offering for God because he gave it to us, and I'm thanking him. Every time you eat, you should, that is an offering you are doing for the Lord. But Jethro did burnt offerings, and part of his offerings were sacrifices, offerings to God of gods. This is bad poo. No, this is prior to Mount Sinai. The only sacrifice is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Passover lamb. At this point, God says later on, he says, when I brought you out of I never commanded you to do sacrifices. No, there was only one sacrifice. And here, prior to Mount Sinai, is a direct reference to this. Oh, here's Jethro doing sacrifices. He never commanded this. What's this? So look at what comes up next in Exodus 18:12. Aaron and the elders came to eat bread with him before God. Almost like they're in opposition. These people's bread would have been manna. This is right after manna. Oh, let's say it's real bread. That's fine. It also says later that they came out with no leaven. They came out there with their leaven, their kneading troughs on their back. They had no leavened bread. And even in the 40th year, I think Moses says, you have not had any leaven in these 40 years. So what bread are they bringing? Unleavened bread? Manna? It sounds like they're in defiant to these guys doing these offerings. Oh, it sounds at first, we're going to bring the bread. You bring the meat, we'll bring the bread. Okay, what bread are they bringing that the Midianites are going to like? Unleavened bread at a minimum. I'm saying it's in complete defiance. Aaron and the elders, not all of Israel, Aaron and the elders brought bread to eat before God with a capital G. And on the morrow, Moses judged the people, verse 14, and his father says, why do you sit alone? Verse 14, what do you mean alone? He's with God. He's got Aaron. What do you mean alone? Judging the people. If it was too much, I think God Almighty would have said something. Oh, maybe God Almighty is sending Jethro and doing this thing. No. Moses did obeisance. And he hearkened to and on the morrow, he says, why do you sit alone? And he tells them, and Moses says, they inquire of God, and I teach them statutes and laws. The only statute at this point is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The only laws are that you are going to, if we will do whatever you say. We haven't even gotten to Sinai yet, and we've agreed to do whatever he says to do, just by word of mouth. We haven't written it down. We're just like getting out. The bitter waters of Marah tested us. Are you going to follow my voice? Okay, and listen to what he says. He says, no, this is not good. It's too heavy for you. You and the people will perish. You can't perform thyself alone. In verse 17, he repeats alone. You can't perform it thyself alone. He's got God. This is total defiant of God. Hearken now unto my, look at verse 19. Exodus 18:19. Hearken. That means hear and obey. Hearken. Not just hear, it means obey. Hearken. Do what I'm about to tell you. Hearken now unto my voice. Oh, you've been listening to God's voice. You're going to teach them about God. You're going to teach them about statutes, laws. Oh, but you take the little matters to these guys over here and the judges. But what you do? Excuse me, you're doing it all yourself. I'm about to tell you to make all these little guys and have all these judges. Because why? You need to hearken unto my voice, and I will give thee counsel, and God will be with thee. Is that what the burning bush said? Go listen to Jethro, and you will be with God. Wasn't the non-burning bush God? No, look at verse 20. And you will teach them ordinances and laws and show the way to walk and the work that they must do. Oh, did God mention any works? Passover so far? Not even the Ten Commandments chiseled in stone yet. But this is Jethro talking. What he's telling Moses he needs to do to go over to God. And that may be all fine and dandy. But look at verse 21. Moreover, this is the wrong part for 100% sure. This is the Nicolaitan hierarchy. Choose out you men that fear God. But we don't care. We don't choose out bad men. Choose out good men that fear God. They know truth, and they don't covet. But make them rulers over. This is what Jesus said. They lord over one another. The Nicolaitans lord over one another. They lord over this guy. They lord over that guy and that guy, which is fine. And a whole bunch of guys down here, and then a whole bunch of more guys down, which is fine. But to go to one guy, yeah, good luck with that. Outside of Moses / Aaron and Zipporah, his wife. Oh yeah, she did a timbrel of crossing the Red Sea, so she have to have seen the Red Sea, and then split after that point when God was desiring to kill Moses, and she circumcised Moses' sons who were older than 8 days. And said, oh, your religion is bloody. Maybe that was at the point that she split. But regardless, she's coming back with Jethro. Jethro is going to go back to Midian. Zipporah is going to go back to Midian. And what's going to happen to the Midianites? The Midianites are going to later join up with the Moabites at the Balaam and Balak fiasco that Phineas, we pronounce it Pincus, had to deal with. These guys turned totally bad. But Jethro will give him all this bad advice. The great things the judge Moses you take, but the small thing you send to these guys to judge. To judge, yes, that's a good thing. You can have a bunch of judges, especially not just coming to one judge. But don't forget, he said rulers. And then if you do this, it'll be easier for you, and it'll disperse the burden. Verse 23, if you do this and God command. Do we see anything in the text about God agreeing? Hey, Moses went to God and said, hey. No, we don't see that. Oh, we think we see it in Deuteronomy. Oh, and I commanded you at that time to do captains over thousands and captains over 50s and captains. Okay, that was after the tabernacle was built a year later, and Moses said, this is too much for me, stone me. Even doing the Nicolaitan hierarchy, and they repeat, even when he did 70 elders at Sinai. And remember the 70 elders went up there to deliver the blood covenant, only the 10 commands and the judgments Moses had written down, no Levitical priesthood system yet, no tablets written in stone, no tabernacle description, let alone building. All that we took up there with the 70 elders, and two guys stayed in the camp and were prophesying. I think it was Elbad and Mebad. Elbad and Mebad. It's easy to remember because El means God. God bad and Mebad means like I'm bad. So it's like saying God is bad and I'm bad. Elbad, Mebad. It's like a good, easy way to remember. So we're still in the camp and we're prophesying. This happened exactly also a year later around the tabernacle that God commanded. And God commanded the 70 to go up there. But no, way back at Jethro, there's no God commanding them. So Jethro even says, if you do this and God command, then you will endure, you and the people. Ex.18:24, Moses hearkened to what his father-in-law had said, and he did all. He hearkened, he heard and obeyed Jethro. I don't want to say over God, but I don't see anywhere in here where he took it to God and he did this over God. 18:24, Moses hearkened to Jethro, his father-in-law. He says father-in-law nine times in chapter 18. That's easy to remember, 9 and 18. Exodus 18 is the story of Jethro coming, and I'm telling you, Jethro was a bad guy. He instituted the Nicolaitan hierarchy that Jesus hates in Revelation, and in the gospel accounts, he says he hates it, for they lord over one another. You have one Lord, him. Okay, then you can have like a bunch of senators, or a bunch of congressmen under that, legislatures under that, even judges under that. Okay, but you don't bring it to one president. You don't bring it to one king. That's the heavenly. The whole book of Judges tells you. You can read the whole book of Judges just by reading the very last line. And all this happened because everyone did what was right in their own eyes. But you see the same thing at Moses at the 40th year. We are not going to do, once you go into the land, you're going to do the feast, you're going to do this, you're going to do the sacrifices. They didn't do any of this. There's no circumcision in the 40 years. He says, once you go over, you're going to do it. Okay, and so he, in verse 18:24, Moses, he hearkened to Jethro, and he did all, and made rulers over thousands, rulers. So rulers. Again, a Nicolaitan hierarchy that he was never commanded to do. But God, again, like when he did not tell the people to set bounds around the mountain, he said, do not come against your wives. Instead, God brought him back up the mountain, and he says, hey, go down and tell him not to send bounds around the mountain. You didn't tell him. And he's like, yes, I told him. He's had a complete misunderstanding. It's the same thing here. He's just, this is prior to Mount Sinai. I'm just showing you that Moses is like Barney Fife. Moses is like Don Knotts. He's not John Wayne, this total strong. He's the meekest man in the world. I don't know, God, my lips are uncircumcised. What will you take off your shoes? This is holy ground. He sorry about that. He has the one meekest man in the world, meekest, and he's being gypped over by this Jethro, who sounds like he's straight out of the book of Satan. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know, Jethro's a mean guy. He's the priest of Midian. Even his son, who stayed there a year later, he wanted to bug out. They all went. Jethro, with his junky Nicolaitan ideas, went back, and Midian joined up with the Moabites at the whole Balaam and Balak fiasco. Just wanted to point that out. The bullet points: Exodus 18 is about junky Jethro. Exodus 18, junky Jethro.